our last question is from a listener named Jay, and he asks, "What's more important, motivation or discipline?"
Discipline.
Is this gonna be like our was it our last episode where you go, you can't isolate the BMO, this is the blog post, and literally just says no. And then motivation versus discipline. Discipline. That's it.
Discipline.
End podcast here.
Discipline. So let's talk about it a little bit more. So I want to set the record straight with motivation. And this comes from Dr. Dale Avers, who really instilled this in us as a class, but in me. There's no such thing as unmotivated. There's always a motivation. It's just that motivation may not align with your motivation. Mm. And where this came from was working with a population, for example, that is in the hospital. They had a illness or something that happened that forced them to stay in the hospital. So we're going in to see them to see, are they able to go home? Should they go to short-term rehab facility? Are we going to use testing for that to happen? But what ends up happening is that these people have this illness, this life-changing thing that occurred. The last thing they want to do is get out of bed. So we used to have this thought of going into the room and them going, hey, we want to get you out of bed. We want to see how many steps we can take. We want to make sure you can do stairs. We just want to see, are you safe to go home? And they would go, no, I'm going to stay in bed. I don't want to do that. And we'd have to try to educate them. And we would go back and forth, and it'd still end with this, no, it's not happening. So we'd come out of the room, and we'd go talk to our clinical instructor or whoever and say, tried to get them to do the appointment, but they were not motivated to participate in the task. No, they weren't unmotivated. They were motivated to stay in bed. We were motivated to get them out of bed. Our goals didn't align. So there is no person that's unmotivated. It's that their motivation is different than what we may want it to be. So that's the quick crash course on motivation. Why is discipline greater than motivation? Something that we typically don't say on this podcast is that something is greater than the other thing. And it deserves context that it depends on the goal. If we rely on motivation, we're not going to stay consistent in what we want to achieve. The difference between motivation and discipline is doing that task, doing that action that you may not want to do in order to get the benefit down the road. It's delayed gratification. And we talk about it in the book. How many times are you truly motivated to want to work out versus being motivated to not work out and go in and be comfortable? How many times are you truly motivated to wake up early and go to work? Versus how many times you're motivated to want to call in or take those few extra minutes in bed? Motivation is the act or the desire of wanting to do something. Discipline is doing it despite the circumstances because you understand that it's going to get you towards your long-term goal. Discipline allows consistency. Motivation allows a bunch of ups and downs, hopping into it, hopping out of it, hopping into it, hopping out of it. We cannot rely on motivation to reach long-term goals. We have to get the behavior of discipline and the habit of discipline. Now, discipline becomes much easier when we understand why we're doing the particular behavior, what it's working us towards, and we have that thing that we're working towards that we're excited about, right? That's what gets me up early. I get excited to do these podcasts, to write more, to speak more, to be with more people. Like that gets me excited to be disciplined. In the times of being disciplined, there's times that I'm motivated to not do work and motivated to take some downtime. But what keeps me from doing that is the habit of discipline or the behavior of discipline.
Yeah, I think another way to say it, although, yes, just snap. Yes, I agree. But another thing I was thinking of is like motivation is almost like present. Like kind of narrow-minded of like
Mhm.
whatever you're fixated on in that moment. um I don't want to say like whatever you're feeling in that moment, because I don't necessarily think it's always about feeling, but motivation is very much like whatever in that moment, where discipline keeps the full picture.
Yeah,
Because there's times where your motivation and your discipline align, and that, I mean, I think that would
that's
be the
great.
goal,
Yeah,
right? Like we want our motivation and our discipline to be aligned, but when they're not, it takes the discipline to remember the full picture of what your authentic motivation and desire is, what your goal, I guess what your goal is, and that there's times when if your motivation is wavering, the discipline keeps like the full picture in mind.
yeah. That was beautifully said. And when we break down the root word of discipline, it comes to disciple.
Mm.
And to be a disciple, we have to know what we're working towards in
Mhm.
order to get that. So once we have that picture and it's more precise, being a disciple that's being disciplined allows us to keep the picture, especially when things aren't going your way
Mhm.
in whatever season that you're in.
Mhm.
The discipline to continue to work and understand that delayed gratification is coming is what's going to keep you from
Mhm.
going. It's so funny. We talk like motivational speakers, and I'm like, yeah, no, exactly. Like you leave that conference like extremely motivated to move in one direction. But if you're motivated, but you don't have the discipline, then you have to keep going to motivational talks to get motivated again. But you're stuck in the same place because you're not being disciplined to actually do that thing.
Maybe we should start calling them disciplinary speakers.
I was thinking of that, and then I immediately thought of the military, and I immediately thought of like, oh man, people wouldn't want to do that because they'd just be afraid of getting
Yeah.
yelled at the whole time. Like, because the other side of discipline is like, oh, discipline is like authority and
Mm.
yelling and being punished, and that's not the angle that we want to take
Yeah.
on discipline or discipleship. It's not about being punished.
Mhm.
It's not about the suffering that can happen within it, but it's remaining purposeful because you see the full picture. And despite the hardships, you keep moving forward because you want to achieve that particular thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Drop the mic. Perfect.